Cynthia and Richard had been together for 8 years, a relationship that many admired from a distance. Cynthia was stunning, elegant, and ambitious, but her beauty carried a shadow. She was proud to the point of arrogance, and her tongue was sharper than a blade. Anyone who did not meet her standard of wealth or class was nothing but filthy in her eyes. She openly called broke people smelly things and made it no secret that she hated their presence. Richard, on the other hand, was calm, patient, and deeply in love. He believed Cynthia's flaws could be managed, and time would soften her edges. For 8 years, he had warned her about her temper, begging her to change. He saw how she insulted her own mother in moments of anger, and it broke his heart. But love blinded him. He hoped that marriage would transform Cynthia into a gentler woman. Through those years, one mystery remained: Richard's mother. She lived in the USA and had never met Cynthia in person. Cynthia only heard stories about her, how she was humble, hardworking, and deeply spiritual. Cynthia imagined a classy woman living a life of luxury abroad, but she never truly cared to know more. Her mind was consumed with planning the perfect wedding, the kind of wedding that would shut down social media for days. 2 days before the wedding, the decorators had been working tirelessly to create the fairytale setting Cynthia demanded. Every flower had to be perfect, every chair lined in gold, and the glass cups arranged like priceless jewels on the tables. Cynthia supervised everything, her sharp eyes darting back and forth, looking for mistakes. One of the younger girls working on the arrangement accidentally dropped a glass cup. The sound of shattering echoed through the hall like a curse. Before the girl could even apologize, Cynthia stormed toward her like a hurricane. Without a thought, she slapped the girl so hard that the entire team froze. The poor girl staggered, clutching her cheek as tears filled her eyes. Cynthia's voice thundered through the hall as she lashed out, calling the girl useless, careless, and dirty. The workers exchanged nervous glances, too afraid to speak. They all knew what kind of bride they were dealing with, a bride whose pride could burn down the entire wedding. Cynthia stormed away, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor, muttering under her breath about people who didn't know class. The morning of the wedding. The arrogance didn't end there. On the morning of her wedding, Cynthia humiliated the makeup artist who had arrived early to make her look flawless. The artist, a kind woman with years of experience, suggested a softer look to highlight Cynthia's natural beauty. But Cynthia snapped. She accused the woman of being incompetent and called her a local hand that wasn't fit to touch her face. Before the artist could explain, Cynthia snatched the makeup brush from her hand and flung it across the room. The woman stood in shock, humiliated in front of the bridesmaids who dared not interfere. And then came the decorators again. While setting up the final details, one of the men accidentally moved the wrong centerpiece. Cynthia saw it and exploded like a ticking bomb. She marched across the room and slapped him, right there, in front of everyone. Gasps filled the hall as she rained insults on him, calling him a broke nobody who should be grateful for the opportunity to work in her presence. Richard had walked in at that moment, his face pale with embarrassment. He took Cynthia aside and begged her to calm down, to stop humiliating people. But Cynthia brushed him off. She believed this was her day, her world, and no one had the right to ruin it. Richard sighed deeply. He had seen this side of her too many times before, and fear clawed at his heart. He prayed silently that nothing would happen to ruin this wedding. But deep down, something told him this day would not end the way he hoped. The big day finally arrived. The venue was like a dream, an outdoor garden filled with exotic flowers, golden chandeliers hanging from elegant tents, and guests dressed in the finest attire. Everything screamed wealth and status, just the way Cynthia wanted. She wore a gown worth millions, a custom design that shimmered under the afternoon sun. Her hair was styled perfectly, and a crown sat proudly on her head. Guests whispered about how beautiful she looked, and Cynthia soaked in every compliment like honey. To her, this was her moment, the day she had waited for, the day to prove to the world that she had arrived. But beneath the elegance and glamour lay a truth Cynthia could not hide. Her arrogance and temper had only grown worse as the wedding approached. The signs had been there long before the ceremony began. The wedding reception unfolded like a page torn from a royal fantasy. The sun bathed the garden in golden hues as laughter and music floated through the air. Guests danced elegantly on the lush green lawn, their attire shimmering under the glow of crystal chandeliers hanging from white silk canopies. Everything appeared perfect, at least on the surface. Cynthia stood at the center of it all, radiating like a queen in her throne room. Her gown glimmered as the soft breeze teased its layers. Her crown sparkled under the sunlight, a symbol of the power and status she believed she had earned. Everywhere she turned, cameras flashed, capturing her elegance, her poise, her wealth. She smiled proudly, soaking in the whispers of admiration that flowed like sweet wine. But beneath the flawless facade was a storm waiting to break. Richard moved through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging smiles, but his heart was heavy. His thoughts drifted back to the morning, to the humiliation of the makeup artist, the decorator who had been slapped, and the frightened look in the eyes of the workers. He had tried to calm Cynthia, tried to make her see reason, but his words fell on deaf ears. "Please, God," he prayed silently, "don't let anything else happen today." Meanwhile, his mother, the woman who had sacrificed her life to raise him, walked quietly among the guests. She had flown thousands of miles just to witness this day, to see her only son happy. She didn't want attention, didn't want to disrupt anything. All she wanted was to help. When she noticed the servers overwhelmed, she volunteered to assist. Her heart was pure, her intentions noble. With a gentle smile, she put on an apron and picked up a tray of wine glasses, carefully making her way through the crowd. She didn't know her act of kindness was about to ignite a firestorm. As Cynthia posed for pictures near the floral arch, her laughter floated above the music. She was in her element, adored and envied by all. The photographers circled her like bees around nectar, praising her beauty and the extravagance of her wedding. She felt untouchable, like a goddess reigning over mortals. And then it happened. Richard's mother, balancing the tray with steady hands, took a careful step forward when someone brushed past her accidentally. It was a slight bump, but enough to tilt the tray. A glass of deep red wine slipped and tumbled through the air in slow motion before crashing onto Cynthia's pristine gown. Crimson liquid splashed across the sparkling white fabric like blood-staining snow. Gasps erupted from every corner. The music screeched to a halt. The photographers froze mid-shot. All eyes turned to the bride. Cynthia stared at the stain in disbelief. Her breath caught in her throat as rage surged like a tidal wave. Her perfect day, ruined. Her $1 million gown, destroyed. Her moment of glory, shattered. And then the storm broke. Her eyes blazed with fury as she spun toward the woman holding the tray. She didn't see an older woman. She didn't see a kind face or trembling hands. All she saw was a maid, an incompetent, filthy worker who had dared to ruin her day. She charged forward like a predator. In a flash, her hand whipped across the woman's face with a sound that echoed louder than the music had moments ago. The slap rang like thunder in the silence. Guests gasped louder, phones raised higher. Some covered their mouths in horror. The woman staggered, her hand flying to her cheek as tears welled in her eyes. She whispered an apology, her voice trembling, but Cynthia was relentless. Words poured out of her mouth like venom, insults sharp enough to cut through steel. She called the woman useless, filthy, worthless. She mocked her uniform, degraded her existence, and spat words that would scar deeper than the slap itself. People exchanged horrified glances. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Did the bride just slap an elderly woman? Cameras zoomed in, capturing every tear, every insult, every trace of Cynthia's rage. Across the garden, Richard froze. At first, he thought he was imagining things. But as he pushed through the crowd and saw the woman's face clearly, his heart shattered into pieces. It wasn't just any woman. It was his mother. The same woman who worked endless hours in America so he could become the man he was. The same woman who sent every penny for his education, who prayed for him every single day. The same mother who flew across the world just to see him smile on this day. And now, she stood there, humiliated and in tears, slapped like a common servant by the woman he thought he loved. Richard's hands trembled as he stared at Cynthia, the bride who once seemed perfect but now stood revealed, her pride and arrogance laid bare before the world. Richard had been watching from a distance just moments earlier, his lips curved into a proud smile as he admired his bride. The woman he had fought for, defended, and believed in stood at the center of his world, draped in elegance, radiating beauty. For a fleeting second, he thought all the years of struggle, of patience, had been worth it. But then, in an instant, that perfect image shattered. Richard's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow disbelief that gripped his soul. His chest constricted painfully as he moved forward, each step heavy, slow, like walking through water. And then, he saw her face. Clearly. His breath caught. His knees nearly buckled. It was her. His mother. The woman Cynthia had just humiliated before hundreds of eyes. The woman she had slapped like a servant, was the same woman who carried his entire childhood on her back. The same woman who had scrubbed floors until her hands bled, who had endured cold nights and hunger to send dollars for his education. The mother who called him every week from America just to remind him he was loved. The mother who sold her jewelry so he could have the life he now lived. And now she stood there, her face pale with shame, tears streaking her cheeks, her trembling hands clutching the edge of her apron. Richard's world spun violently. Sounds faded, replaced by the deafening roar of his own heartbeat. His memories attacked him in waves, the arguments with Cynthia about her temper, the warnings he whispered late at night, the pleading in his voice every time she insulted someone. One day, this anger of yours will destroy everything, he had said. And here it was, destroying everything in the most merciless way possible. Guests gasped and whispered, their eyes darting between Cynthia and the crying woman. Cameras zoomed in like vultures circling a dying prey, flashing relentlessly, immortalizing the moment for the world to feast upon. Richard's jaw clenched. Fury trembled in his voice as he spoke, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the murmuring crowd. His words were like hammers breaking stone. This, he pointed to the woman sobbing, is my mother. A ripple of shock tore through the crowd like a storm wind. Cynthia's face drained of color. Her knees quivered beneath the weight of her gown. The jeweled crown on her head suddenly felt like a curse, pressing down, suffocating her. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Richard's voice broke, choked by betrayal and rage. The woman you slapped, insulted, and called names, is the reason I am standing here today. She is the reason you even had a chance to wear that dress. Cynthia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat burned, her heart slammed against her ribs like a caged animal. The whispers of the crowd grew louder, crueler, until they became an avalanche of shame crashing over her. In that moment, the dream wedding she bragged about for months turned into a nightmare that would haunt her forever. The cameras kept rolling. The guests kept staring. And as Richard looked at her one last time, his eyes, once filled with love, were now oceans of disappointment and pain. And in a single sentence, everything she had built, her pride, her status, her perfect image, crumbled into dust. Silence fell over the reception like a shroud. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, all died in an instant. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the earth itself wanted to witness Cynthia's downfall. She stood frozen, her body rigid, her heart pounding against her ribs like a war drum. Her mind spun wildly, searching for words, any words, to explain, to justify, to beg for forgiveness. But none came. Her throat was dry. Her lips trembled. The damage was done, carved into reality before hundreds of merciless eyes. Flashes erupted like lightning in a storm. Guests whispered behind manicured hands, their murmurs slicing through the heavy silence. Every lens captured her shame, immortalizing it for a world that would soon feast on the scandal. Richard moved slowly, his steps deliberate, like a man carrying the weight of 1,000 stones. He reached his mother and drew her into his arms with a tenderness that made the moment even more unbearable. The woman who once scrubbed her hands raw to give him a better life now sobbed quietly against his chest, humiliated beyond measure. Richard's tears spilled freely as he pressed a kiss to her forehead, his lips trembling with the words he could not speak. Then he turned to Cynthia. The look in his eyes was no longer love. It was a tempest, a violent collision of hurt, betrayal, and rage that seared through her like fire. For years, she believed she owned his heart completely. Now she saw the truth. She had shattered it with her own hands. Without speaking, Richard slipped his fingers into his pocket and pulled out the ring. That small circle of gold, once a promise of forever, now felt like a curse. He held it for a heartbeat, long enough for everyone to see, then let it fall. The sound was soft, barely a metallic whisper as it hit the grass, but to Cynthia, it was thunder. A deafening roar that echoed through her bones, splitting her soul in two. Richard didn't look back. He turned, lifting his mother gently, his arm firm around her shoulders as he walked away. The crowd parted like a tide, watching in stunned silence as the groom disappeared with the woman Cynthia had reduced to tears. And Cynthia, once the queen of this day, draped in diamonds and pride, collapsed to her knees. Her pristine white gown sank into the earth, stained with spilled wine and something darker, regret. Her crown slipped, tilting awkwardly, like a cruel mockery of the royalty she once imagined herself to be. The whispers grew louder. The cameras kept rolling. Already, hashtags were being born, captions crafted, headlines forming, bride slaps groom's mother at wedding. Her humiliation would not end here. It would travel the world before midnight. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, a day of glory, love, and triumph. Instead, it became a tragedy of her own making, a day her pride murdered everything good. And long after the guests left, long after the lights dimmed and the music faded, one sound would haunt her forever, the echo of that single, reckless slap that destroyed her world. 1 month later, Cynthia sat on the edge of the hospital bed, clutching the white pregnancy results slip in her trembling hands. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the nurses could hear it. Positive. She was pregnant. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were not entirely tears of joy. They were mixed with fear, confusion, and regret. How do I tell Richard? She thought bitterly. He hasn't spoken to me since the wedding disaster. Since that shameful day when she slapped his mother in front of everyone, Richard had completely cut her off. He cancelled the wedding reception halfway, told her never to call him, and even moved out of the apartment they were supposed to share. Her calls went unanswered. Her texts were left on read. But now, everything had changed. She carried his child. Cynthia wiped her tears, grabbed her phone, and dialed his number. It rang. Once. Twice. He picked up. Richard. Please, don't hang up. I need to see you. It's important. His voice was calm but cold. Cynthia, what do you want? There's nothing left to talk about. Please, she whispered desperately. It's about your child. There was a long pause on the line. Then Richard's voice returned, firm but controlled. My, what? Your child. I'm pregnant. Another heavy silence. She could almost hear his breathing change. Then his tone turned icy. Meet me at the Haven Hotel. Room 207. In an hour. Cynthia's heart raced as the line went dead. An hour later, Cynthia walked into the hotel room, clutching her handbag nervously. Richard stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the city lights. He turned slowly when she entered. His eyes were dark, unreadable. You're pregnant? He asked flatly. Yes, she said softly, her voice trembling. I found out today. Richard took a deep breath, then let out a bitter laugh. Wow! Of all the things that could happen. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing. Do you have any idea what you did to me? To my mother? To my family? I know, Richard. I'm sorry. I lost control that day. I didn't mean to. You slapped my mother on our wedding day, Cynthia, he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. Do you know the humiliation? The disgrace? The media still hasn't stopped talking about it. Cynthia fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, forgive me. I was angry. I felt she was trying to control everything. But I love you, Richard. Please, don't abandon me now. Don't abandon our child. Richard stared at her for a long moment. His jaw tightened. Then he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. I will never abandon my child. But you, Cynthia, you and I are finished. There will be no marriage. No second chance. Her heart shattered into pieces. Richard, please. He cut her off sharply. From now on, everything is about the baby. I'll take care of my child, but you and I, he stepped closer, his eyes burning with anger, are strangers. Do you understand? Cynthia collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably as Richard turned away, his decision final. But deep down, Richard knew this was only the beginning of a bigger storm. From that day on, Richard began taking responsibility, not because he wanted Cynthia back, but because he refused to let his child grow up without a father. He moved her into a small, quiet apartment in town, far from the whispers and judgmental eyes of the community. Cynthia couldn't believe it. After everything, Richard still chose to stand by her during the pregnancy. He accompanied her to doctor's appointments, made sure she ate well, and even hired a nurse when she started experiencing severe morning sickness. But Richard made one thing clear every single day. I'm here for the baby, not for you. Don't mistake my kindness for love. Cynthia nodded, but deep down, she prayed every night that Richard's heart would soften again. That maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what they lost. Richard, on the other hand, kept his distance emotionally. He slept in a separate room whenever he stayed over and avoided unnecessary conversations. But as the pregnancy progressed, something unexpected started happening. He found himself feeling protective of Cynthia, not out of love for her, but for the life growing inside her. When the baby kicked for the first time, Cynthia grabbed Richard's hand and placed it on her belly. For the first time in months, Richard smiled. It was small, but it was there. Wow, that's our baby, he whispered, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. For a moment, Cynthia thought she saw a glimpse of the old Richard, the man she fell in love with. But would that be enough to heal the wounds of betrayal? Or was this only temporary? Months passed, and Cynthia's belly grew round with life. Richard never left her side. He became the perfect partner, attending every prenatal checkup, cooking for her, rubbing her swollen feet, and whispering sweet words to calm her fears. Everyone who saw them together believed they were the happiest couple alive. But deep inside, Cynthia was not at peace. A strange anger always burned in her heart. It wasn't the normal mood swings of pregnancy. This was something darker. She found herself lashing out at Richard over little things, shouting, throwing things, even accusing him of things he hadn't done. Richard remained patient, holding her through tears and rage. But Cynthia knew something was wrong. Something bigger than her. At night, when Richard slept, she sat by the window, crying uncontrollably. She didn't know why the thought of the baby scared her so much. One stormy evening, while sorting out some old things in her mother's room, Cynthia overheard a shocking conversation between her mother and her aunt. Her mother spoke in a low, trembling voice. I thought time would erase it. I never told Cynthia the truth. Years ago, I wronged an old woman in this village. I humiliated her publicly because I thought she was a witch trying to destroy my marriage. That day, she cursed me, saying, "Your daughter will carry your punishment. She will never know peace. Her first child will bring her disgrace and endless tears." Cynthia froze, her hands shaking. Suddenly, everything made sense. The uncontrollable anger, the fear of her unborn child, the strange dreams where she saw herself covered in blood, holding a crying baby while people mocked her. Her chest tightened as her mother continued in a whisper. The woman died a week later, but the curse, it has followed us. Cynthia dropped the basket she was holding, and it crashed loudly. Her mother and aunt turned to see her standing there, pale as a ghost, tears streaming down her face. "Mummy, is this true?" she cried out. "You brought this curse on me? On my innocent baby?" Her mother tried to hold her, but Cynthia pushed her away and ran outside into the rain, screaming. That night, Richard found her kneeling in the mud, crying to God to save her baby. But deep in her heart, a voice whispered, "The curse cannot be broken." Thank you, dear viewers, for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends for more exciting and emotional stories.